Hello there and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales. Tonight we set sail upon the wine-dark sea of the ancient world, into the oldest of all voyages home. Imagine a time before books and screens, when stories lived only in the breath of the storyteller, carried from one firelit night to the next across 3,000 years. Tonight we drift into the world of the Odyssey, the great tale of a man trying only to reach his own front door, and of all the strange islands, monsters and temptations that stood between him and home. You do not need to remember a single name or place. You only need to let these old stories wash over you the way a slow tide moves a small boat, gently, without hurry, out toward the deep and peaceful dark. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, let your shoulders soften and your breathing slow. Let the room grow warm and quiet around you, like a harbor at nightfall. Let's begin. The Odyssey is one of the oldest stories humankind still tells. Think of how many voices it has passed through to reach you tonight. The Odyssey was already ancient when Rome was young, already old when the first histories were written down. It comes to us from a world nearly 3,000 years distant, a world of bronze and sail and firelight. And yet it has never once been forgotten. Generation after generation has learned it, loved it, and handed it on, like a lamp passed carefully from one pair of hands to the next across the long dark of centuries. Empires that came after it have risen and crumbled into dust. Whole languages have been born and have died. And still this single tale of a man trying to sail home endures. There is something quietly astonishing in that. Of all the countless stories told around all the countless fires of history, this one refused to fade. Tonight, when you listen, you are joining an audience that stretches back 100 generations, all of them leaning in toward the same voyage, the same longing, the same distant and beckoning shore. The Odyssey was made to be heard, not read. Long before it was ever written down, this was a spoken poem, sung aloud by traveling performers to listeners gathered close in the dark. It belonged to the ear and the voice, not to the page. A singer would arrive at a hall or a gathering, take up a stringed instrument and begin, drawing the crowd into the tale hour by hour through the long evening. There were no printed pages to follow along, no silent private reading as we know it now. The poem lived only in performance, in the rise and fall of a human voice filling a room. This is worth remembering as you rest tonight, because it means the Odyssey was always meant to be exactly this, a story received by the ear in the quiet, letting the words carry you somewhere else. You are hearing it much as its very first audiences did, thousands of years ago, not studying it, but simply listening, letting the sound and the rhythm of it do their gentle ancient work upon a tired mind at the close of the day. We cannot be certain that Homer was a single person. The Odyssey has always been linked to the name Homer, the great poet of ancient Greece. Yet the truth about him is wrapped in deep mystery. We know almost nothing certain about his life. We do not know for sure when he lived, or where, or even whether he was one man at all. Some believe Homer was a single brilliant poet who shaped these tales into their finished form. Others think the name may stand for a whole tradition of singers, many voices across many years, blended together and remembered under one name. There are old stories that he was blind, wandering from town to town, but these too may be legend rather than fact. In a way, this uncertainty suits the poem. It rose out of a time before careful records, out of the shared memory of a people rather than the pen of one author. Homer, whoever he was, or whoever they were, remains a shadow at the edge of history, a name we give to the source of something far larger than any single life could hold. The very word Odyssey comes from this story. We use the word so easily now. We speak of a long journey, a winding personal quest, an adventure full of trials, and we call it an Odyssey. Few pause to remember that the word is simply a name. It comes from Odysseus, the hero of this poem, the wandering king whose 10-year struggle to reach home gave us the word entirely. His name became the title of his tale, and his tale became so famous that the title itself passed into everyday speech, standing forever after for any great and testing voyage. It is a rare kind of fame, to have your very name dissolve into the language and become a common word that millions use without thinking of you at all. Yet that is what happened to this one wanderer. Every time someone anywhere speaks of an Odyssey, they are quietly echoing a story sung thousands of years ago, about a single man and his long, hard, hopeful road toward the shores of his own small island home. The whole vast epic covers only a few short weeks. Here is a curious thing about the way the tale is told. Odysseus is away from home for 20 years in all, 10 of them at war, and 10 more wandering the sea, yet the poem itself does not march slowly through all that time. Instead, it gathers up the final stretch, the last weeks of the long ordeal, and tells the story mostly there, near the very end. The many years of earlier adventure are folded in through memory and recollection, told as tales within the tale. This gives the whole poem a strange and dreamlike shape, where the deep past and the urgent present flow together. We arrive when the wandering is almost done, when home is near but not yet reached, and we feel the ache of that nearness. It is a masterful choice by whoever shaped the poem. Rather than a plain march from beginning to end, we get the long story bent and folded upon itself, the way memory itself works in a restful mind, where distant years and this present moment can lie quietly side by side. The story begins in the middle of things. When the Odyssey opens, we do not start at the beginning of the adventure. The Great War is already long over. The other heroes have already gone home. Odysseus has already suffered most of his fabled trials. We drop into the tale near its end, with our hero stranded far away and his household in crisis. And only later do we circle back to learn all that came before. The ancients had a phrase for this way of storytelling, plunging the listener straight into the heart of the action, rather than laboring through everything in order. It was admired as a mark of great skill, and countless stories ever since have followed the same path, opening in the thick of things and filling in the past as they go. There is a gentle wisdom in it. Life itself rarely lets us start neatly at the beginning. We always arrive in the middle of things, in the midst of stories already long unfolding, and we learn the shape of them slowly, piece by piece, just as the listeners of this old poem did so long ago. Odysseus himself does not appear until well into the tale. You might expect a hero's story to open with the hero, yet the Odyssey makes us wait. Its opening chapters do not follow Odysseus at all, but his home, his grieving wife, and above all his young son, who has grown up scarcely knowing his father. We spend the first stretch of the poem in the hero's empty house and on his son's own small journey in search of news. Only after this do we finally reach the famous wanderer himself, far off across the sea. This patient delay does something lovely. By the time we meet Odysseus, we already understand exactly what he is missing and exactly what waits for him, the home and the family that ache for his return. His absence is made real to us before his presence is. So when at last we find him, weeping on a distant shore for the home he cannot reach, we feel the full weight of that longing because we have already stood inside the very house his heart is straining toward. The Odyssey is a sequel to an even older war. This great tale of wandering does not stand alone. It follows a still earlier story, the tale of a mighty war fought over 10 long years at the walls of a distant city. That war and its heroes were sung in another great poem, and the Odyssey picks up after all of it is finished. Its hero, Odysseus, was one of the famous warriors of that conflict, and his voyage home is the aftermath, the long unwinding of a war that has ended for everyone but him. Knowing this deepens the whole poem. Odysseus is not setting out fresh and eager. He is already worn down by a decade of fighting, weary to his bones, wanting nothing now but to lay down his arms and go home. His story is not one of seeking glory, but of seeking rest, of a soldier who has had more than enough of blood and only wishes to return to a quiet life. It is, in its heart, a story about the long, hard road home after a great trouble, a road that so many across history have had to walk. The war that began it all started over a single stolen queen. The great conflict that stands behind the Odyssey was said to have begun with a woman, the most beautiful in all the world. She was the wife of a king, and a prince from a distant city carried her away, whether by force or by love the old tales dispute. To win her back, a vast alliance of kings and warriors gathered a fleet and sailed across the sea, laying siege to that far city for 10 long years. From such a spark, the legends say, came all the suffering that followed, the fall of a great city and the scattering of its conquerors across the seas. Odysseus was one of those who sailed to fight in that war, and so his whole long ordeal traces back, in a sense, to that first fateful theft. It is a reminder woven through all these old stories that great catastrophes may spring from small and human beginnings, from love and pride and wounded honor, and that the consequences can ripple outward for years, carrying countless souls far from the homes they never wished to leave. Odysseus never wanted to go to the war at all. For all that he became one of its most celebrated heroes, Odysseus was deeply reluctant to join the Great War. The old stories tell that when the call came, he tried to escape it. He had a wife he loved, and a newborn son, and a small kingdom he was content to rule in peace. Legend says he even feigned madness to avoid being taken, pretending to have lost his wits so that he might be left behind. But his ruse was uncovered, and he was drawn into the war after all. There is something touching in this beginning. The man whose name became a byword for wandering and adventure would have chosen, if he could, to stay quietly at home all along. His whole epic longing to return is all the sharper for it. He was torn from a life he loved and did not wish to leave, and every trial of his long voyage is, at heart, an effort to undo that first unwilling departure and simply get back to where he had always wanted to be. The famous wooden horse was Odysseus's own idea. Among all the tricks in these old tales, none is more famous than the great hollow horse. After 10 years of siege that could not break the city walls, it was cunning, not force, that finally won the war. A huge wooden horse was built and left as if in offering, with warriors hidden secretly inside. The defenders, believing the enemy had sailed away in defeat, dragged the horse within their own walls in triumph. In the dark of night, the hidden men crept out, and the city fell at last. And it was Odysseus, according to the tales, who devised this brilliant deception. It was the crowning proof of his defining gift, a mind that could find a clever path where strength alone had failed. The image has endured for thousands of years, a symbol of the danger hidden inside a welcome gift, and it tells us exactly what kind of hero Odysseus is. He conquers not by being the strongest or the bravest, but by being the cleverest, the man who thinks his way through when brute force can find no way at all. The hero's greatest weapon was always his mind. In the world of these ancient tales, there were heroes famous for their strength, their speed, their raw courage in battle. Odysseus was something different. His fame rested above all on his cunning, on a quick and inventive mind that could find a way out of any trap. The old poems praise him again and again for his cleverness, his craft, his gift for schemes and clever words. Where other heroes might charge straight ahead, Odysseus would pause, think, and find the subtle path. This is part of what makes his story feel so enduring and so human. He wins not because he is more than a man, but because he uses the most human thing of all, his wits. Through his long ordeal, it is his mind that saves him time and again, outwitting monsters, escaping captors, talking his way to safety. In an age that loved great warriors, the Odyssey quietly celebrates a different kind of greatness. The power of intelligence and patience over sheer might. The triumph of the clever survivor over the merely strong. Odysseus was known by many names and many phrases. The singers of old had a lovely habit. Rather than simply saying a hero's name, they would attach to it a little descriptive phrase, repeated each time he appeared. So Odysseus is called by many such tags through the poem. He is the man of many turns, the one of twists and schemes, the much enduring, the great teller of tales, the sacker of cities, the resourceful one. These repeated phrases were partly a help to the singer, ready-made pieces to fit the rhythm of the line, but they were also little portraits, each one catching some facet of the man. Taken together, they paint him vividly, a hero defined by his cleverness, his endurance, and his gift with words. There is a soothing quality to these repeated descriptions when you hear the poem aloud, the same warm phrases returning again and again like a familiar refrain. They wrap the hero in his own reputation, so that every time he steps forward, we are reminded exactly who he is, this man of many turns, journeying ever homeward across the wide and restless sea. The gods themselves take sides in his story. In the world of the Odyssey, the immortal gods are close at hand, watching the affairs of mortals and often meddling in them. And in this tale, they are divided over the fate of one wandering man. The grey-eyed goddess of wisdom loves Odysseus dearly, delighting in his cleverness as though it mirrored her own, and she guards and guides him whenever she can. But the great god of the sea has become his bitter enemy, and it is across the sea that Odysseus must travel home. So the hero is caught between powers far greater than himself, aided by one immortal and hounded by another. This gives his journey a sense of vast forces at play behind every wave and wind. To the ancient mind, the storms that battered a ship and the strange fortunes of a voyage were not random. They were the will of the gods, the visible signs of unseen quarrels in the heavens. Odysseus struggles not only against monsters and men, but against the anger of a god, and it is this that stretches his homeward road from a matter of weeks into 10 long years. The sea god's anger drives the whole long tale. The reason Odysseus wanders so long and suffers so much comes down, in large part, to the wrath of the god who rules the sea. During his travels, Odysseus gravely wronged one of that god's own kin, blinding a monstrous son of his, and the god never forgave it. From then on, whenever Odysseus set out across the water, storms would rise, winds would turn against him, and his ships would be driven far off course. The very element he had to cross to reach home became his greatest enemy, stirred to fury by a power he could not fight. This is the deep engine of the whole story. It is not merely bad luck that keeps Odysseus from home, but a divine grudge, patient and relentless, following him across every sea. And it carries a hard old lesson at its heart, that one rash act in a moment of pride can echo through years of suffering afterward. The whole 10-year ordeal of wandering springs, in the end, from a single reckless deed and the long cold anger it awoke in a god. The journey home should have taken only a few weeks. When the great war was finally over, Odysseus set sail for his island kingdom with his ships and his men, expecting an ordinary voyage home. The distance was not truly so vast. In fair weather, with good fortune, the crossing might have been made in a matter of weeks. Instead, it became a wandering of 10 long years, a voyage stretched and tangled by storm and monster and the anger of the gods until it swallowed a whole decade of his life. There is a quiet poignancy in that gap between what should have been and what was. Odysseus set out simply to go home, as any traveler does, and found the ordinary journey turned into an epic of endless trial. Perhaps that is part of why the tale still speaks to us. We all know the feeling, in smaller ways, of a simple path that somehow becomes long and hard, of a goal that keeps receding no matter how we strive toward it. The road home, which looked so short at the start, became the great labor of his life. The first great temptation was simply to forget. Early in his wanderings, Odysseus and his crew came to a gentle land where the people lived on a strange and lovely flowering plant. Those who ate of it were overcome by a sweet forgetfulness. They lost all desire to leave, all memory of home, all wish to continue the hard journey onward. A few of Odysseus's men tasted the plant, and at once they wanted only to stay in that dreamy place forever, to drift in soft contentment and never think of home again. Odysseus had to drag them back to the ships by force, weeping though they were to be taken away from their bliss. It is a haunting early trial, and a subtle one. The danger here is not a monster or a storm, but the simple temptation to give up, to forget one's purpose, to sink into an easy, painless forgetting. Of all the perils on the long road home, this quiet one may be the most human. The pull to stop striving and simply let the memory of home dissolve into a warm and gentle haze. The encounter with the one-eyed giant changed everything. Of all Odysseus's adventures, none is more famous or more fateful than his meeting with the monstrous one-eyed giant. Seeking supplies, Odysseus and a small band entered the creature's cave, and there they were trapped. The giant was enormous and savage, and he blocked the entrance with a stone too great for any man to move. He began to devour Odysseus's men, and escape seemed impossible. It was here that the hero's cunning was put to its greatest test. He could not overpower the giant, so he had to outthink him. This one encounter would echo through the entire rest of the poem, for the giant was a son of the sea god, and it was this deed that unleashed the god's undying anger. What began as one desperate escape from a cave became the hinge on which the whole long tragedy of his wandering turned. Everything that followed, all the years of storm and loss, can be traced back to this dark cave and the terrible bargain of survival that Odysseus struck within it. He escaped the giant by giving a false name. Trapped in the giant's cave, Odysseus devised a plan of daring cleverness. When the giant asked his name, Odysseus told him it was nobody. Then, waiting until the creature had fallen into a heavy sleep, he and his men drove a great sharpened stake into the giant's single eye, blinding him. The monster woke roaring in agony, and his neighbors, hearing his cries, called out to ask who was hurting him. "Nobody," he bellowed. "Nobody is killing me." And so his fellow giants, thinking he was merely raving or ill, went away and left him to his pain. By the simple trick of a false name, Odysseus had turned the giant's own cry for help into nonsense. Blinded and helpless, the giant could no longer see to catch them, and the men slipped free. It is one of the cleverest strokes in all of storytelling. A hero saving his life not with a sword, but with a play on words, proving once more that in this tale it is the quick mind, far more than the strong arm, that carries a man through. His own pride nearly destroyed him. Having escaped the blinded giant, Odysseus should have sailed quietly away and counted himself lucky. But pride got the better of him. As his ship pulled from the shore, he could not resist calling back across the water, taunting the giant and, worst of all, shouting out his true name so the creature would know exactly who had bested him. It was a fatal boast. Now the giant knew the name of his tormentor, and he called upon his father, the great god of the sea, to curse the man who had blinded him. That curse became the engine of Odysseus's long suffering. Had he only kept silent, kept his cleverness quiet in that final moment, the god might never have known whom to punish. But the hero's need to be known, to claim his triumph aloud, undid him. It is a piercing lesson tucked inside the adventure. The same boldness that made him great also carried the seed of his downfall, and a single moment of pride brought him 10 years of sorrow upon the sea. A bag of winds once brought him within sight of home. Among the strangest of his adventures, Odysseus came to an island ruled by a keeper of the winds, who received him kindly. As a parting gift, this master of the breezes gave Odysseus a great leather bag, into which he had tied up all the stormy and contrary winds. Only one gentle wind was left free, the one that would blow the ship straight home. With this marvelous gift, Odysseus set sail, and for 9 days and nights the friendly wind carried them onward, until at last, on the 10th day, they came so near to their island that they could see the very fires burning on its shores. Home was there before their eyes, close enough to make out figures on the land. After all the years and all the trials, the goal was finally within reach, near enough to touch. It is one of the most heartbreaking near misses in all of story, that shimmering glimpse of home across the water, so close that the weary men could almost feel the solid ground of their own island beneath their feet. His own crew undid him at the very threshold of home. With home in sight after the gift of the winds, Odysseus at last allowed himself to rest, worn out from days at the helm. But while he slept, his crew fell to whispering. They saw the great leather bag their captain guarded so closely, and grew certain it was full of secret treasure he meant to keep for himself. Consumed by greed and suspicion, they untied it, hoping for gold. Out rushed all the imprisoned storm winds at once, in a howling gale that seized the ships and drove them violently back across the sea, all the long way they had come, until home vanished once more over the horizon. In an instant, the labor of years was undone by a moment of foolish curiosity. It is a bitter turn, and a very human one. Odysseus is betrayed not by a monster or a god this time, but by the ordinary flaws of his own men, their greed and their distrust. So often in his story it is human weakness, as much as any curse, that snatches home away just as it comes within reach. Not every island in the poem was gentle. As his ships wandered on, Odysseus came upon many shores, and not all of them offered welcome. On one, he found a land of enormous and violent giants, who fell upon his fleet with terrible force. They hurled great rocks down from the cliffs, smashing the ships in the harbor and destroying nearly all of them. Only Odysseus's own vessel, moored a little apart, managed to escape, cutting its ropes and fleeing out to open water while the rest were lost. It was a devastating blow, one of the darkest moments of the whole voyage, in which the greater part of his little fleet and its men were destroyed in a single dreadful stroke. This episode reminds us that the world of the Odyssey is a perilous one, where an unknown shore might hold hospitality or horror, and a wanderer could never be sure which. Each new island was a gamble with the unknown. Behind the wonder of the poem there runs a thread of real danger and real loss, the constant thinning of Odysseus's company as, one by one, his companions fell. A powerful enchantress turned his men into swine. On another island, Odysseus's men came upon the hall of a beautiful and mysterious woman skilled in enchantments. She welcomed a party of the sailors and offered them food and drink, but the meal was laced with a potent spell. As soon as they had eaten, she touched them with her wand and transformed them into pigs, herding the bewildered creatures, still keeping their human minds, into her sties. Only one man escaped to bring the terrible news back to Odysseus. It is one of the eeriest images in the poem, brave sailors reduced in a moment to grunting beasts, trapped in animal shape yet aware of all they had lost. The enchantress was a figure of great power, dwelling alone with her spells and her tame wild animals in a forest clearing. To rescue his men, Odysseus would have to face her himself, matching his wits and courage against her magic. Once again the story turns on transformation and trickery, on the thin and shifting line between human and beast, and on a hero who must find a way to undo a spell that mere strength could never break. A single magic herb saved him from the enchantment. When Odysseus set out to rescue his transformed men, he seemed to be walking straight into the same trap that had caught them. But on the way, a helpful god appeared and gave him a rare protective herb, a plant with a black root and a milk-white flower, said to guard against the enchantress's magic. With this herb, Odysseus was made immune to her spells. When she offered him the same drugged cup and struck at him with her wand, expecting him to fall into a beast's shape like the others, nothing happened. Astonished that her magic had failed, she recognized at last the man she had been warned would one day come. Overpowered by his resistance and his resolve, she agreed to release his men and restore them to human form. It is a moment where a small, humble thing, a single herb plucked from the earth, becomes the key to overcoming a great power. Even in a world of gods and monsters, the poem suggests, salvation can come from the smallest of gifts, quietly carried and used at the right moment. Odysseus had to journey to the land of the dead. Perhaps the most awesome of all his trials was this. To find his way home, Odysseus was told he must first make a journey no living man should make, down to the shadowy land of the dead, to seek the counsel of a departed seer. He sailed to the edge of the world, to a dim and misty place at the border of the living and the dead, and there performed the solemn rites to call up the spirits. Out of the darkness, the shades of the dead came drifting toward him, pale and insubstantial, the souls of the departed gathering at the edge of the light. It is a scene of great and quiet power, a living man standing at the threshold of the afterlife, speaking with those who have passed beyond. This descent into the realm of the dead became one of the most influential passages in all of literature, echoed in countless later stories of heroes who must journey into darkness before they can find their way home. To reach the land of the living, Odysseus first had to visit the land of the dead. In the underworld, he met a blind prophet. The purpose of Odysseus's dark journey was to consult a famous seer, a prophet whose wisdom had been so great that it survived even his death. Though blind in life, this seer could see what others could not, and among the shades of the dead his spirit still held its gift of foresight. He came forward to speak with Odysseus and told him what lay ahead, the dangers still to be faced, the trials still to come, and the shape of his eventual homecoming. He gave warnings that Odysseus would need to heed if he hoped to reach his home at last, and he foretold things about the far-distant future as well. There is something deeply fitting in seeking wisdom from the dead. Those who have passed beyond life, the ancients felt, might see the whole of things more clearly than the living, unclouded by hope or fear. So the hero, lost and uncertain in the middle of his troubles, turns to the counsel of one who has crossed to the other side and carries that hard-won wisdom back with him into the land of the living. Among the dead, he found his own mother. While Odysseus stood at the threshold of the underworld, among the many drifting shades, he suddenly saw one he knew, the spirit of his own mother. She had been alive when he left for the war, and he had not known that she had died in his long absence. To meet her there, among the dead, was a shock of terrible grief. He reached out to embrace her, but his arms passed through empty air, for a shade has no body to hold. 3 times he tried to fold her in his arms, and 3 times she slipped through like a shadow or a dream. It is one of the most tender and sorrowful moments in the whole poem. A son meeting his dead mother and unable to touch her, learning only now, so far from home, that she was gone. She told him she had died of nothing but longing for him, of grief at his endless absence. In that quiet, aching scene, the vast adventure narrows suddenly to the smallest and most human of sorrows. A child who has lost a parent and cannot even hold them one last time. Even the greatest of dead heroes longed for life. Among the shades Odysseus met in the underworld was the spirit of the mightiest warrior of the age. A hero who in life had chosen a short and glorious existence over a long and quiet one. Now, in death, Odysseus tried to comfort him, saying that surely he must be honored as a king among the dead, ruling in glory even in the afterlife. But the great hero's answer was startling and sorrowful. He said he would rather be alive and a poor servant, laboring for some landless man, than be a king over all the vanished dead. Better the humblest life under the sun, he said, than the greatest glory among the shades. It is a moment of profound and unexpected wisdom, spoken by the very hero who had once seemed to prize glory above life itself. In death, all that fame looked hollow to him beside the simple sweetness of being alive. It is a quiet lesson from the underworld, that life itself, even a hard and humble life, is a precious thing, more to be treasured than all the honor in the world. The song of the Sirens promised not beauty but knowledge. Sailing on, Odysseus faced one of the most famous perils of the sea, the Sirens, whose voices lured sailors to their doom. We often imagine their song as simply beautiful, an irresistible sweetness, but the old poem tells us something stranger and more interesting. What the Sirens truly offered was knowledge. They sang that they knew all things, all that had happened, and all that would come to pass, and they promised that any man who listened would sail on wiser than before. That was the true bait, not mere beauty, but the promise of knowing everything. And it was deadly, for sailors so entranced by that promise would steer toward the voices and be wrecked upon the rocks, their bones left whitening on the shore. There is a deep insight hidden here. The most dangerous temptation is not always pleasure, but the craving to know, the hunger to possess all wisdom and all secrets. The Sirens understood that a clever, curious mind like Odysseus's would be drawn most powerfully not by loveliness alone, but by the whispered promise that it might, at last, understand everything. He heard the Sirens sing and yet survived. Odysseus longed to hear the famous song of the Sirens, but he knew that to hear it unprotected was death, so he devised a careful plan. He ordered his men to stop their own ears with soft wax, so that they could hear nothing at all, and would keep rowing steadily past the danger. But he himself, wishing to hear the song and live, had his men bind him tightly to the mast of the ship. He told them that no matter how he begged or struggled, they must not release him until the danger was past, but only bind him tighter. And so it happened. As they rowed by, the Sirens sang, and Odysseus, hearing that irresistible voice, strained and pleaded to be freed, desperate to go to them, but his men, deaf to it all, only tied him faster and rowed on until the song faded behind them. In this way, Odysseus became, in the old story, the one man to hear the sirens and yet live, satisfying his deep curiosity while guarding, through foresight, against the ruin it would otherwise have brought. Then he had to choose between two horrors at once. After the sirens came a narrow strait where two deadly perils faced each other across the water. On one side lurked a many-headed monster in a high cave who snatched sailors from passing ships. On the other side was a vast whirlpool that swallowed the sea and any vessel upon it. To pass through, a ship had to sail between them, and there was no way to avoid both. To steer clear of the whirlpool meant coming within reach of the monster, and to flee the monster meant risking the whirlpool that would destroy the whole ship at once. Odysseus was warned of this cruel choice in advance, and told there was no perfect escape, only the lesser of two evils. From this ancient scene comes the very idea of being caught between two dangers, with no safe path between, a predicament people have described in the same terms ever since. It is one of the poem's hardest truths, that sometimes there is no choice that spares us all loss, only the grim wisdom of choosing which loss we can better bear. Some losses simply could not be avoided. Faced with the two horrors of the strait, Odysseus made a terrible decision. He chose to steer away from the whirlpool that would destroy his entire ship, and instead to pass nearer the monster in the cliff. Knowing it would seize a few of his men, he did not even tell his crew of this, fearing they would panic and stop rowing. And so it happened as he feared. As they rowed through, the monster darted down and snatched several of his companions, plucking them from the deck even as they cried out to him by name. He could do nothing to save them. He said afterward that it was the most pitiful thing he saw in all his sufferings, to watch his men carried off before his eyes and be powerless to help. It is a harsh and honest moment. Odysseus, the great problem solver, here faces a situation his cleverness cannot fix, where the only path forward is paid for with lives. Sometimes, the poem admits, there is no trick, no escape, only the hard necessity of accepting a loss in order that anyone at all may survive. Forbidden cattle brought doom upon his crew. Weary and hungry, Odysseus and his remaining men came at last to a beautiful island where great herds of cattle grazed. But these were no ordinary beasts. They belonged to the god of the sun, and Odysseus had been sternly warned by the prophet in the underworld that whatever else they did, they must never harm these sacred animals. For a time the men obeyed, but bad winds trapped them on the island. Their supplies ran out, and hunger gnawed at them. At last, while Odysseus slept, his starving crew gave in and slaughtered some of the forbidden cattle to eat. It was a fatal transgression. When the sun god learned of it, he demanded punishment, and it was granted. Here again we see the pattern of the whole poem. Disaster brought on by a moment of weakness in the face of temptation. The men knew the rule and knew the danger, but hunger and desperation overcame their judgment, and for that single act of violation, driven though it was by need, the price would be nothing less than their lives. In the end, Odysseus alone survived. The punishment for slaughtering the sun god's sacred cattle was swift and total. When the men finally set sail again, a great storm rose up and shattered their ship. Every one of Odysseus's remaining companions was lost to the sea. All the men who had sailed with him from the war, who had endured the giant and the enchantress and all the trials of the long voyage, perished, until only Odysseus himself was left alive, clinging to the wreckage. He alone survived, and he survived alone. From that point on, he would be a solitary wanderer, having lost every last one of the men he set out with. There is a deep loneliness in this turning point. The hero who began his voyage as the captain of a fleet, with many ships and many hundreds of men, is reduced at last to a single soul adrift on the open water. All his cleverness could not save his crew from their own choices. He goes on toward home, carrying not triumph but grief, the sole survivor of a company that the sea has entirely swallowed. A goddess kept him for years, held by love. Alone and shipwrecked, Odysseus washed ashore on a remote and lovely island, the home of a beautiful goddess who dwelt there in solitude. She took him in, and she came to love him, and she kept him with her on that island for a very long time, 7 years in all. It was a strange kind of captivity, gentle and even sweet, for she cared for him and offered him every comfort. Yet for all its beauty, it was still a prison to his heart, because it was not home and she was not his wife. Day after day he stayed, sharing the goddess's cave and her company, and year after year slipped by. This long, quiet stretch is one of the most unusual parts of his story. It is not a trial of monsters or storms, but of time itself, of years dissolving on a paradise island, while the thing he truly wants lies always out of reach. The danger here is soft and slow, the risk that a comfortable exile might quietly become permanent, and that a man might forget, amid such ease, the hard and distant shore of home. He was offered immortality, and he turned it down. On the island of the goddess, Odysseus was made an extraordinary offer. The goddess, wishing to keep him with her forever, promised to make him immortal and ageless, to lift him out of the reach of death itself. She would give him eternal life, unending youth, and her own divine companionship, if only he would stay. It was a gift beyond any mortal dream, the very thing so many heroes had longed for. Freedom from death, and Odysseus refused it. He chose instead his mortal wife, his aging self, his rocky little kingdom, and the ordinary human life that waited for him at home. He would rather grow old and die as a man in his own house than live forever as the companion of a goddess. It is one of the most moving choices in all of literature. Offered the escape from death that humankind has always craved, Odysseus turns it down for the sake of home and love and his own mortal life. In doing so, he affirms something profound, that a true human life, however brief, is more precious than an eternity of exile. He wept for home upon a paradise island. Though the goddess's island was beautiful beyond compare, with soft meadows and running springs and every delight, Odysseus was not happy there. The old poem gives us an unforgettable image of him, going each day to sit upon the shore, gazing out over the empty sea toward the home he could not reach, and weeping. His days were spent in longing, his eyes fixed on the water, his heart aching for his wife and his son and his own land. All the loveliness around him meant nothing beside that grief. It is a striking picture, a man in paradise and utterly miserable, because paradise is not home. The scene captures something we all understand, that no beauty, no comfort, no ease can truly satisfy the heart that longs to be somewhere else, somewhere it belongs. Odysseus on that shining shore, staring across the sea with tears on his face, is the very image of homesickness itself, the deep and simple ache to return to the place and the people that are truly ours, no matter how fair the golden cage that holds us. An old Greek longing gives us the word nostalgia. At the very heart of the Odyssey lies a single powerful feeling, the longing to return home. The ancient Greeks had a special word for the act of homecoming, for that safe return to one's own land after long absence. It was a central idea in their world, the crown of a hero's struggles, the thing most devoutly wished for. And that ancient idea of homecoming lives on quietly, in a word we still use today. Our word for that bittersweet ache of longing, that tender pull toward home and the past, was built long afterward from that very Greek root for homecoming, joined to another old word meaning pain, so the word carries within it, still, the pain of longing for home, the exact feeling that drives Odysseus across the sea. Every time we speak of that wistful ache for a place we have loved and left, we are reaching back, without knowing it, to the oldest theme of this oldest poem, the homesickness of one wandering king, sung 3,000 years ago, echoes softly in a word we use to this very day. At last, a council of the gods set him free. For all his longing, Odysseus could not free himself from the goddess's island. It was only when the gods themselves intervened that his release finally came. High on the mountain of the immortals, the goddess who favored Odysseus pleaded his case before the king of the gods, arguing that this good man had suffered long enough and deserved at last to return home. The king agreed, and a messenger was sent to the island to command the goddess to let her mortal guest go. Though it grieved her, she obeyed the will of the gods. It is a reminder of how, in this poem, The fate of a single struggling man is bound up with the decisions of powers far greater than himself. Odysseus cannot simply will his way home. He needs the tides of divine favor to turn, needs the gods above to remember him and take pity. And when at last they do, when the word comes down that he may go, the long-stalled journey stirs to life once more, and the weary wanderer is finally allowed to set his face toward home. He built his own small raft to sail for home. Freed at last from the island, Odysseus had no ship and no crew, for all had been lost long before. So he built himself a small raft with his own hands, cutting and shaping the timber, fitting it together as best he could. The goddess, keeping her promise, gave him tools and provisions and a fair wind to send him on his way. And so, alone upon a little raft of his own making, this once great commander of fleets set out across the wide and dangerous sea toward home. There is a humble dignity in the image. The hero who had sailed with many ships and hundreds of men now trusts his life to a few rough logs lashed together by his own labor. Yet he goes willingly, gladly, for it means he is moving toward home again at last. It shows us the depth of his resolve, that he would rather risk the open ocean on a frail raft than dwell forever in ease upon a goddess's island. Whatever it took, however small the vessel, he would find his way back to his own shore. The sea god wrecked him one final, brutal time. Odysseus's little raft did not carry him gently home. His old enemy, the god of the sea, spotted him sailing at last and flew into a rage that his hated foe should be so near to escaping. He gathered the clouds and stirred up all the winds at once, whipping the water into a towering storm. The waves crashed over the raft, the masts snapped, and Odysseus was hurled into the churning sea. For a long time he was tossed and battered, struggling simply to keep his head above the water, certain he would drown after all his years of striving. It was the sea god's last great blow against him, a final attempt to destroy the wanderer before he could reach home. And it nearly succeeded. Stripped of his raft, alone in the raging water, Odysseus clung to life by the barest thread. Even now, so close to the end of his long ordeal, the poem grants him no easy passage. The sea that had swallowed his ships and his men made one last furious effort to swallow him too, before he could set foot upon dry land. A gentle sea goddess saved him with a veil. As Odysseus fought for his life in the storm, close to drowning, help came from an unexpected source. A kindly goddess of the sea, taking pity on the struggling man, rose up beside him. She gave him a magical veil, telling him to wind it about his body, for it would keep him from sinking and from harm as long as he wore it. Then she bade him abandon the broken remnants of his raft and trust himself to the water, swimming for the distant shore. Odysseus, though wary, did as she said, and the enchanted veil bore him up through the wild sea. For 2 days and nights he was carried and buffeted by the waves, until at last, exhausted beyond measure, he reached land. It is a moment of grace amid the fury, one immortal reaching down to save a mortal from another immortal's wrath. In the world of the poem, the gods are not only sources of danger, but sometimes of rescue. And here, when all seemed lost, a merciful power of the deep chose to preserve the weary traveler and see him safely to the shore. He washed ashore among a gentle and generous people. After his long struggle in the sea, Odysseus dragged himself, naked and half dead, onto the shore of an unknown land. It proved to be the home of a peaceful and welcoming people, famous for their skill upon the water and their kindness to strangers. They lived in a fair and prosperous kingdom, ruled by a wise king and queen, far removed from the monsters and dangers of his earlier wanderings. Here, at last, Odysseus found refuge and rest. These gentle people took him in, gave him food and clothing and a place at their table, and listened with wonder to his tale. It is among them that much of the poem's storytelling unfolds, as the exhausted hero, safe for a time, finally has the chance to recover and to tell all that has befallen him. After so many hostile shores, this one offers genuine hospitality, a reminder that the world of the poem holds not only peril, but also great human kindness, and that a lost and broken stranger might, now and then, find open arms and a warm hearth waiting at the end of a hard road. A young princess found him upon the beach. When Odysseus first stumbled ashore in that friendly land, exhausted and unclothed, it was a young princess who discovered him. She had come down to the river near the shore with her attendants to wash linens, and while they played by the water, the ragged, weather-beaten stranger emerged from the bushes where he had slept. Her companions fled in fright at the sight of him, but the princess, brave and gracious, stood her ground. Odysseus, careful not to frighten her, spoke gently and with great courtesy, praising her and humbly asking for help. Moved by pity and by his respectful words, she gave him clothing and food and directed him toward her father's palace, where he might find welcome. It is a lovely, human scene amid all the wonders, a meeting of a lost old wanderer and a kind young woman, marked by tact and gentleness on both sides. The princess shows a quiet nobility, unafraid to help a stranger in need, and Odysseus shows once more his gift with words, winning safety and kindness not by force, but by the grace and wisdom of his speech. He told his own long story as a guest at the feast. Once safe among the gentle seafaring people, Odysseus was honored with a great feast. When he was asked who he was and whence he had come, he finally revealed his name and began to tell the tale of all his wanderings. And so, in one of the poem's most memorable turns, the hero himself becomes the storyteller. Much of the most famous material, the giant, the enchantress, the underworld, the sirens, all of it is told by Odysseus in his own voice, recounting his adventures to the spellbound court. The great deeds of his voyage reach us not as plain narration, but as the hero's own remembrance, spoken aloud at a feast. There is a beautiful layering in this, a story within the story, the wanderer recounting his own past to an audience within the poem, even as the poem is recounted to us. It reminds us that the Odyssey is, at its very core, a tale about telling tales, about the way we make sense of our sufferings by shaping them into a story, and about the deep human need to be heard, to say at last, "This is who I am, and this is what I have endured." The gentle people possessed marvelous, magical ships. The seafaring people who sheltered Odysseus were renowned above all for their extraordinary ships. These were no ordinary vessels. In the old tale, they were said to be almost magical, needing no steersman and no rudder, for they understood the thoughts of the men aboard and knew of themselves where to go. Swift as a bird or a thought, they could carry a traveler across the sea with wondrous speed and never go astray, finding their way through fog and darkness without fail. It is a charming flight of imagination, these self-guiding ships that sailed by will alone, a dream of effortless travel across the dangerous deep. For Odysseus, who had suffered so terribly upon the water, storm-tossed and wrecked again and again, such ships must have seemed a marvel almost too good to be true, vessels that could not be blown off course or lost, that would deliver him surely and safely to any shore he named. After all his years of fighting the sea, he was to be carried home at last upon ships that the sea itself could not defeat. They carried him home while he slept peacefully. At last the kindly people made ready to bring Odysseus home. They loaded their marvelous ship with rich gifts for him and set out across the sea by night. And here the poem offers a gentle and dreamlike image. As the swift, sure ship glided over the water, Odysseus, worn out by all his years of struggle and grief, fell into a deep and peaceful sleep, the sweetest and most untroubled rest he had known in all his wandering. He slept soundly as the magical vessel carried him swiftly and silently across the dark sea toward his own land. After 20 years of war and wandering, of sleepless watches and constant danger, he crossed the final stretch of his journey unconscious, at perfect rest, borne home like a child asleep in loving arms. There is something deeply soothing in the picture. The exhausted traveler finally letting go of all his vigilance, sinking into a profound and healing sleep, while unseen hands carry him safely to the very place his heart has ached for. The last leg of his long odyssey was made not in struggle, but in peace. Their kindness was cruelly punished by a jealous god. The gentle people paid a heavy price for their generosity in bringing Odysseus home. The god of the sea, still nursing his old grudge, was enraged that they had helped his enemy reach his land, and he took a harsh revenge upon them. As their marvelous ship returned from carrying Odysseus, the gods struck it, and in the old tale it was turned to stone within sight of their own harbor, a grim monument at the mouth of their bay. It was a cruel punishment for a simple act of kindness, and it cast a shadow of fear over that peaceful people, who resolved after this never again to offer such passage to strangers. There is a sorrowful edge to this part of the story, a reminder that in the world of the poem, even doing good could bring down divine anger, and that the gods could be petty and unforgiving. The very hospitality that saved Odysseus was turned against those who showed it, yet their kindness had done its work. Odysseus was home at last, and that homecoming, however dearly it cost his rescuers, could no longer be undone. He arrived home at last and did not know it. After 20 years away, Odysseus was finally set down upon the shore of his own beloved island, sound asleep, along with all the gifts the kind people had given him. But when he woke, a strange thing happened. He did not recognize his own homeland. A goddess had wrapped the shore in a concealing mist, and everything looked unfamiliar to his eyes. After so long away, and confused by the enchanted haze, the very land he had crossed the world to reach seemed foreign to him. He feared for a moment that he had been abandoned in yet another strange and hostile place, and despair came over him. Then the goddess who loved him appeared, and revealed the truth, that this was indeed his own island, home at last. There is a poignant strangeness in the moment, a man returning after 20 years to find home so changed, or himself so changed, that he does not know it at first sight. It captures a real and tender truth, that the places we long for and finally return to can feel, for a moment, unrecognizable, until slowly, gently, we come to know them once again as our own. Meanwhile, his home had fallen under a long siege. While Odysseus wandered, his house was not left in peace. Believing him most likely dead after so many years, a crowd of arrogant young noblemen had descended upon his home, each hoping to marry his wife and seize his kingdom. These suitors moved into his hall as unwelcome guests and simply would not leave. Day after day they feasted at his expense, devouring his herds, drinking his wine, and wasting his wealth, while they pressed his wife to choose one of them as a new husband. They had overrun his household like a swarm, insolent and greedy, showing no respect for the absent king or his grieving family. So while Odysseus fought monsters and storms far away, a different kind of trouble was consuming his home from within. His homecoming, when it finally came, would not be to a quiet and waiting house, but to one under a slow siege, occupied by dozens of hostile men who had made themselves fat on his property. The danger of his journey's end lay not on the sea at all, but within the very walls he had struggled so long to reach. His wife was the true hero of patience. Through all the long years of Odysseus's absence, his wife held the household together against the pressing suitors, and she did so with a steadfastness that matched her husband's own famous endurance. She refused to believe he was dead, refused to give up hope, and refused to be forced into a marriage she did not want. Surrounded by dozens of demanding men who ate away at her home and clamored for her hand, she stood firm year after year, waiting and hoping and quietly resisting. Her weapon was not the sword, but patience, loyalty, and cleverness, and by these she guarded her husband's house and honor through 2 long decades. She has become, ever since, a symbol of faithful devotion, of a love that endures through the longest separation and the hardest trials. If Odysseus is the hero of the wandering, she is surely the hero of the waiting, and her steadfast constancy is as remarkable in its own quiet way as any of his adventures. The poem honors not only the man who braved the sea, but the woman who, with equal courage, held fast to hope at home. She wove a clever trick to hold the suitors off. Pressed by the suitors to choose a new husband, Odysseus's wife devised a cunning delay worthy of her clever husband. She announced that she could not remarry until she had finished weaving a fine burial shroud for her husband's aged father, a proper and pious task that none could deny her. So each day she sat at her loom and wove, and the suitors waited, but each night, in secret, she quietly unraveled the work she had done that day. In this way the shroud was never finished, for what she wove by day she undid by dark, and by this trick she put off the suitors for years without their ever knowing why the weaving never ended. It was a stroke of cunning to match any of her husband's schemes, buying precious time through patient deception. At last the trick was betrayed by a disloyal servant, and she was forced to complete the work. But for a long while, her secret unweaving held her unwanted suitors at bay, and it stands as one of the poem's finest examples of the same quick, clever wit that ran in the family, used here in the quiet warfare of the household. Her cleverness matched her husband's own. It is no accident that Odysseus and his wife were so well suited, for she was as clever as he was, a fitting partner for the most cunning of heroes. The trick of the unraveled weaving was only one sign of her sharp and subtle mind. Throughout the long years, and especially at the end, she showed a gift for careful strategy, for testing and deception that mirrored her famous husband's. When he finally returned, it would be her cleverness, as much as his, that shaped their reunion. The poem clearly delights in this match of two clever minds. Husband and wife, each a master of patient cunning, each able to guard a secret and lay a subtle trap. Their bond is not only one of love and loyalty, but of shared intelligence. A meeting of two people who understand each other's craftiness completely. In a tale that prizes wit above brute strength, it is deeply fitting that the hero's true equal should be his wife, and that their long-delayed reunion should turn, in the end, on a clever test that only two such well-matched minds could devise and pass. His son set out to search for word of him. Odysseus had left behind an infant son when he sailed to war, and that son had grown to young manhood, scarcely knowing his father, having only stories and a fading hope that he yet lived. As the poem opens, this young man is troubled by the suitors crowding his home and grieved by his father's long absence. Encouraged and guided by the goddess of wisdom, he resolves to act. He sets out on a journey of his own, sailing to visit the great lords who had fought alongside his father, hoping to learn some news of whether he was alive or dead. It is a coming-of-age tale woven into the larger story. The son stepping bravely into the world in search of the father he barely remembers. His journey mirrors and prepares for his father's return, and it shows a boy growing into a man, taking up the burden of his family's honor. The opening of the poem belongs largely to him, and through his young eyes we first feel the sorrow of Odysseus's absence, and the deep, unfinished longing of a household waiting for its master to come home. A goddess guided the young man in disguise and gave us a word. When Odysseus's son set out on his journey, he did not go entirely alone. The goddess of wisdom, watching over the family, chose to guide and advise him. But she did not appear in her own divine form. Instead, she took on the shape and voice of an old and trusted friend of the family, an elder who could counsel the young man without alarming him. In this humble guise, she accompanied him, offering wisdom, encouragement, and advice as he found his way in the wider world. The name of that old counselor whose form she borrowed has come down to us as a common word in our own language. From it we get the very word we use for a wise and trusted guide, an experienced advisor who helps a younger person grow. So every time someone speaks of having a mentor or of mentoring another, they are unknowingly echoing this ancient poem and that disguised goddess who watched over a young man's first journey into the world. A single character from this old tale gave us a word we still use, thousands of years on, for the guiding hand of the wise. Odysseus returned to his own home in disguise. When Odysseus finally reached his own house after 20 years, he did not stride in openly as the returning king. That would have been far too dangerous, for the hostile suitors filled his hall and would surely have killed him. Instead, aided by the goddess, he took on a clever disguise. She transformed his appearance so that he looked like an old, ragged beggar, worn and unrecognizable. And in this humble guise, he entered his own home unknown. There he could watch and listen, learning who was loyal and who was false, gauging the situation before he revealed himself and struck. It is the ultimate expression of his defining cleverness, that even at his long-awaited homecoming he does not rush in but plays a patient, careful part, hiding his true self behind the rags of a beggar. There is something both sad and shrewd in the picture. The great king creeping into his own house as a stranger, insulted and overlooked, biding his time. He would reclaim his home not by open force at first, but as he had won so many battles before, through disguise, patience, and the careful laying of a trap. Only his faithful old dog knew him at once. In one of the most touching moments of the entire poem, the disguised Odysseus, unrecognized by everyone, was known at once by a single loyal soul, his old hunting dog. As a young pup, this dog had been Odysseus's own, but 20 years had passed, and the animal was now ancient, neglected, and feeble, lying forgotten on a heap of dung outside the hall. Yet when Odysseus passed by in his beggar's disguise, the old dog knew him instantly. He could no longer rise or run to his master, but he lifted his head, dropped his ears, and wagged his tail in recognition, knowing after all those years the one he had waited for. No disguise could fool the love and memory of that faithful animal. It is a moment of piercing tenderness in the midst of the tale, the loyal dog recognizing the master that no human eye could see through, and it speaks to the deep and simple faithfulness of animals, and to the way love remembers what the passing years and every cunning disguise cannot erase. The loyal dog died having waited to see him return. The story of Odysseus's faithful dog reaches its heartbreaking end in the same moment as its joy. Having lived on in neglect through all the 20 years of his master's absence, kept alive it seems by nothing but the hope of his return, the ancient dog recognized Odysseus at last as he passed by in disguise. And in that very instant, having seen his beloved master come home again after so long, the old dog died. It was as though he had held on to life only for that, only to see Odysseus once more, and having seen him, could finally let go. Odysseus, unable to reveal himself, had to pass by without acknowledging his old companion, brushing away a hidden tear. It is one of the most quietly devastating scenes in all of literature. The faithful animal, waiting through 2 long decades, granted one last glimpse of the one he loved, and dying content in that moment of reunion. In just a few lines, the poem captures the whole depth of loyalty and love, and the bittersweet grace of a long wait finally, tenderly rewarded at the very end. An old servant knew him by an ancient scar. As Odysseus lingered in his home disguised as a beggar, one person came very close to uncovering his secret. An aged servant woman, who had nursed him when he was a child, was given the task of washing the strange beggar's feet. As she bathed him, her hands found an old scar upon his leg, a mark she knew well, for she had known it since his boyhood. In an instant she recognized her master, and in her joy and shock she nearly cried out and gave him away. But Odysseus swiftly hushed her, swearing her to secrecy, for the time was not yet right to reveal himself. It is a moment of great tension and tenderness, the loyal old nurse discovering the truth by the touch of a familiar scar, her heart overflowing even as she must keep silent. The scar becomes a kind of secret signature of his identity, known only to those who had loved him long ago. And it shows how even the most careful disguise cannot fully erase the marks a life leaves upon the body, the old wounds that quietly tell the truth of who we are. That scar carried the story of his very name. The old scar by which the nurse knew Odysseus was not a meaningless mark. It came from a hunting accident in his youth, when he had gone with his kinsman to hunt a great wild boar, and the beast had gashed his leg before he killed it. The poem pauses in its urgent action to tell the whole story of that long-ago hunt, and of how Odysseus came by his name in the first place, given to him by his grandfather when he was born. In that quiet backward glance, the scar becomes a doorway into the hero's entire past, his childhood, his family, the very origin of his name. It is a beautiful example of the poem's rich layering, a single moment in the present opening suddenly onto a whole remembered life. The mark on his leg is not just proof of who he is now, but a thread reaching back to his beginnings, to the boy he once was and the family that named and shaped him. In the touch of that old scar, the hero's long-lost history rises up, quietly binding the wanderer of today to the child he had been so long before. He carefully tested the loyalty of his household. Before revealing himself openly, the disguised Odysseus moved carefully through his home, testing the people in it to learn who had stayed true to him and who had turned false in his absence. Among the servants and herdsmen, he found some who had remained loyal and faithful through all the long years, still honoring their absent master and grieving his loss. Others had gone over to the arrogant suitors, betraying the household for their own comfort. Odysseus watched and listened, marking who was who, gathering to himself the few faithful souls who would help him, and noting those who had proven false. In particular, he found steadfast friends among his humble herdsmen, simple, honest men whose loyalty had never wavered. It is a study in the quiet virtue of faithfulness, showing that true worth was not a matter of rank, for it was the lowly, honest servants who kept faith, while the proud young nobles dishonored his house. As he prepared to reclaim his home, Odysseus first sought to know exactly whom he could trust, and it was upon the loyalty of a faithful few that his final victory would depend. His old father grieved alone in the distant fields. Odysseus had left behind not only a wife and son, but an aging father, and that old man too had suffered greatly through the long years of his son's absence. Grieved by the loss and worn down by sorrow, the old father had withdrawn from the household to live simply in the countryside, laboring in his orchard and garden, keeping to himself in his mourning. He had let himself grow ragged and neglected, an old man wearing out his last years in grief for a son he feared he would never see again. When Odysseus at last went to find him, the reunion of father and son is among the tender scenes near the poem's close, the old man scarcely daring to believe that his lost child had truly come home. It reminds us that Odysseus's long absence left its wound not only on his wife and son, but across the whole family, 3 generations touched by his loss. And it deepens the meaning of his homecoming, which is not only a return to a place, but a healing of a family long broken by his wandering, restoring a grieving father's son to him at the very end of his days. His wife set an impossible contest to choose a husband. As the suitors pressed ever harder for her to remarry, Odysseus's wife at last announced a contest to decide the matter. Though her true purpose ran deeper, she brought out her long-absent husband's great bow, a mighty weapon that he alone had been able to use, and declared that she would marry whichever of the suitors could string it and shoot an arrow through a row of axe heads, as her husband once had. It was a task of enormous difficulty. One by one the suitors tried, and one by one they failed, unable even to bend the great bow enough to string it, let alone make the difficult shot. The contest seemed impossible, and that, perhaps, was partly the point. Whether by cunning design or by fateful timing, she had set a test that only her true husband could pass, on the very day he had secretly returned. The stage was set for a reckoning. The great bow, silent for 20 years, waited in the hall for a hand strong and skilled enough to draw it, and only one such hand was present, hidden still beneath a beggar's rags. Only one man in the hall could string the great bow. As the suitors struggled and failed to string Odysseus's mighty bow, the disguised hero, still in his beggar's rags, asked if he too might try. The suitors scoffed and jeered at the ragged stranger's presumption, but he was allowed his turn. Then, before their astonished eyes, the old beggar took up the great bow that none of them could bend, and strung it with ease, as a skilled musician strings an instrument. Effortlessly he drew it and sent an arrow flying clean through the row of axe heads, a feat none other could perform. In that moment the truth began to dawn upon the hall. This was no beggar. Only one man in all the world could string and shoot that bow, and he had returned at last. It is a scene of tremendous power, the long-hidden king revealing his identity through the one deed that no impostor could match. The bow becomes the proof of who he is, and as he holds it strung and ready in his hands, 20 years of waiting and wandering gather to a single point, and the moment of reckoning arrives at last. The bow itself became a test of true identity. There is a deep meaning in the way Odysseus's homecoming turned upon that great bow. Throughout the poem, his identity is a hidden and guarded thing, concealed behind disguise and false names, and it is finally proven not by his word alone, which anyone might speak, but by a deed that he alone could perform. The stringing of the bow was a test that no cleverness or claim could fake. Either a man could bend that mighty weapon, or he could not, and only the true Odysseus could. So the bow served as a kind of infallible sign of who he really was, cutting through all disguise. It is fitting in a poem so concerned with identity, with knowing who is truly who beneath the surface. Time and again the story asks how we recognize a person after long years and great changes, and here it gives one answer, that true identity reveals itself in what a person can actually do, in deeds that cannot be counterfeited. The bow that only Odysseus could string was the final, undeniable proof that the wanderer had truly come home. The homecoming turned into a stern reckoning. Once Odysseus had strung the great bow and revealed himself, the long-awaited homecoming became a moment of fierce reckoning. The arrogant suitors who had devoured his household, insulted his family, and plotted against his son, now faced the master they had wronged, returned and armed. What followed was a swift and terrible settling of accounts, as Odysseus turned the bow upon the men who had overrun his home. The feasting hall, so long the scene of their insolence, became the place of their downfall. It is the violent climax toward which the whole latter half of the poem has been building, the return of the rightful king and the punishment of those who had abused his home in his absence. To the ancient audience, this was justice, the restoration of order after a long wrong, the master reclaiming what was his and answering the insult done to his house. After 20 years of struggle, Odysseus at last stood in his own hall, no longer a wanderer or a beggar, but the king returned, delivering a hard and final judgment upon those who had thought him gone forever. He fought that final battle with only a few at his side. When the reckoning with the suitors came, Odysseus did not stand alone. The suitors were many, a whole crowd of young men, while Odysseus had only a small handful of allies, his loyal son and 2 faithful servants who had proven true. Against such odds, the little group had to fight with courage and cunning both. They had secretly removed the suitors' weapons beforehand and barred the doors so that the trapped men could not easily arm themselves or flee. Still, it was a hard and desperate fight, a few determined defenders against a much larger throng. It is fitting that Odysseus's reclaiming of his home was a family affair, fought side by side with his own son, the 2 of them together with a couple of loyal men, reclaiming what was theirs. The bond between father and son, so long broken by absence, was sealed in this shared struggle. The young man fighting bravely alongside the father he had only just come to know. Against many, the loyal few prevailed, and the strength of their loyalty and their cause proved greater than the mere numbers arrayed against them. The goddess of wisdom turned the tide of the fight. Though Odysseus and his small band fought bravely against the suitors, they did not win by mortal strength alone. The goddess who had favored and guided Odysseus through all his trials was present at the end as well, lending her aid to his cause. She encouraged him, protected him and his companions, and helped to turn the battle in their favor, so that the few overcame the many. As so often in the poem, the hand of the divine is felt behind the deeds of men, the loyal goddess ensuring that her favored hero would triumph in this final test. It is a reminder that throughout his long story, Odysseus was never entirely alone. For all his own cleverness and courage, he was watched over by a powerful friend among the gods, whose favor helped carry him through dangers that might otherwise have destroyed him. In this last great struggle, as in so many before, mortal effort and divine aid worked together, and the wisdom goddess who had loved him from the start saw to it that his long labors ended in victory, and that the wanderer's home was his once more. Justice in the ancient poem could be harsh. The reckoning at the end of the Odyssey was, to modernize, severe. Not only the arrogant suitors, but also those servants who had betrayed the household and sided with them faced a hard punishment. The disloyal maids who had been unfaithful to their master's house were dealt with sternly, and no mercy was shown to those judged to have done wrong. It reflects the values of a distant age, one that prized loyalty and honor above all, and that answered grave betrayal with grave consequence. To the poem's original audience, this harshness was the restoration of a rightful order, the wiping clean of a long injustice done to a noble house. To us, looking back across thousands of years, it can seem stark and unforgiving, a reminder of how differently that ancient world weighed mercy and justice. It is one of the places where the great gulf of time shows itself, where the old story reveals values not quite our own. The poem does not soften this reckoning. but presents it as the necessary settling of accounts, the price exacted for the wrongs done against a home and a family in their master's long absence. His wife did not at first believe it was truly him. Even after Odysseus had slain the suitors and revealed himself, his wife did not rush into his arms. Cautious and clever, after 20 years of guarding herself and her home against deceit, she held back, unwilling to believe too easily that this man was truly her long-lost husband. She had learned to trust no one, to suspect every claim, and she would not be fooled now by someone who merely looked like Odysseus or claimed his name. Her son grew upset at her coolness, but she remained wary, wanting to be certain beyond all doubt. It is a remarkable and very human touch. After so long a separation and so much deception all around her, she cannot simply take this stranger's word, however much her heart may leap. Her caution mirrors her husband's own careful nature, and it shows a woman who is survived by her wits and will not lightly let down her guard. Before she could open her heart, she needed proof, sure and certain, that this was truly the man she had waited for through 20 long and lonely years. And so she devised, in her own clever way, a final test. She tested him with the secret of their bed, to be certain the man before her was truly her husband. Odysseus's wife set a subtle trap, testing him with a secret only the real Odysseus could know. She quietly instructed a servant to move their marriage bed out of the bedchamber to make it ready for him. At this, Odysseus reacted with dismay, for he knew that bed could not be moved, and in his reaction, he revealed the very secret that proved his identity. Only the true Odysseus would know why the bed could not simply be carried from the room. Her clever test had worked perfectly, drawing out the proof she needed not by asking directly, but by prompting a response that only her real husband could give. It was cunning worthy of Odysseus himself, and indeed it delighted him even as it undid his caution. At last she was certain. This was truly her husband, come home after all the long years. Her careful heart could finally open, its long vigilance rewarded, and the two were reunited in a joy made all the deeper by the patient, clever care with which she had guarded herself until she could be sure. Their marriage bed was carved from a living tree. The secret that proved Odysseus's identity to his wife was a beautiful and telling one. Long ago, Odysseus had built their marriage bed himself, and he had built it around the trunk of a living olive tree that grew on the spot. He had made one of its posts from the rooted tree itself, so that the bed was joined to the living earth and could not be moved without cutting it free. This was a secret known only to the two of them and one trusted servant. So when his wife spoke of moving the bed, and Odysseus protested that it could not be moved unless someone had cut through the tree, she knew at once that this was truly her husband. The image is a lovely one, a marriage bed rooted in a living tree, immovable, grown from the ground itself. It stands as a quiet symbol of their marriage, deep-rooted and unshakable, grounded like the tree through all the storms of 20 years apart. Their bond, like that bed, was fixed and enduring, joined to something living and firm that no absence and no passage of time could uproot or carry away. Only the two of them shared that secret. The deepest meaning of the bed rooted in the olive tree lies in its secrecy. It was a thing known only to Odysseus and his wife, a private truth at the very heart of their marriage, hidden from all the world, and so it became the perfect proof of identity and the perfect emblem of their bond. In a poem full of disguise and concealment, where Odysseus hides behind false names and beggars rags, it is a shared secret that finally, truly reunites him with his wife. Their reunion rests not on appearance, which can be faked, nor on mere words, which anyone might speak, but on a private knowledge that only two people in all the world possessed. There is something profound in that, the idea that what truly binds two people and truly proves who they are to each other is the store of secret things they alone share. After 20 years apart, it was not his face or his voice that convinced her, but the hidden knowledge that lived only between them. Their marriage was reaffirmed by the one secret that made them, unmistakably and forever, husband and wife. The reunion of husband and wife is the poem's true heart. For all its monsters and marvels, its gods and its battles, the deepest emotional center of the Odyssey is this quiet moment, the reunion of a husband and wife long parted. When at last his wife knew him for certain, the two came together in an embrace of overwhelming joy and relief, weeping in each other's arms after 20 years of separation. The old poem describes their gladness as being like the joy of shipwrecked sailors who, against all hope, finally reach the shore. All the wandering, all the suffering, all the long years of waiting come to rest in this tender meeting of two faithful hearts. It reveals what the whole poem has truly been about. Beneath the grand adventures, the Odyssey is a story of love and loyalty and homecoming, of two people who kept faith across an impossible distance and were reunited at last. The greatest treasure Odysseus won was not gold or glory, but this, the return to the one who had waited for him. And in their long embrace, the deepest longing of the entire poem is finally, quietly fulfilled. The story nearly ended in yet more bloodshed. The reunion of Odysseus and his wife was joyful, but the poem was not quite finished, for one danger remained. The families of the slain suitors, learning of the deaths of their sons and brothers, were filled with grief and anger, and they gathered to take revenge upon Odysseus. Just as peace seemed won, a new cycle of violence threatened to begin, the old law of vengeance drawing yet more blood. Odysseus and his son and father armed themselves once more, and it seemed the island might be torn apart by a feud between the returning king and the kin of those he had slain. After all the hero had endured to come home, his homeland itself now stood on the brink of civil strife on his account. It is a reminder of how one act of violence, however justified it may seem, can breed another, how vengeance calls to vengeance in an endless chain. The homecoming that should have brought only peace, instead, threatened to spark a new and bitter conflict, and for a moment it seemed the hard-won joy of return might dissolve into further sorrow and killing. The gods themselves finally imposed peace. The threatened feud between Odysseus and the families of the slain suitors did not, in the end, consume the island. Before the fighting could go far, the gods intervened to stop it. The goddess of wisdom, with the blessing of the king of the gods, stepped in and commanded that the bloodshed cease and that peace be made between the two sides. By divine authority, the cycle of vengeance was halted, and the people were reconciled, the old wrongs set aside so that the island could live in peace once more. And so the poem ends not with more killing, but with a restored calm, a peace laid down from above upon a land that had known too much strife. It is a fitting close for a story that has traveled through so much danger and loss, to arrive at last at reconciliation and rest. The gods, who had driven so much of the tale's conflict, here bring it to a gentle resolution, closing the long account of Odysseus's troubles with the gift of peace. After 20 years of war and wandering, and one final brush with violence, the wanderer's world is made quiet again, and the story can come to its rest. His wanderings, a prophecy said, were not quite over. Though the Odyssey ends with Odysseus home and at peace, the poem hints that his journeys were not entirely finished. Back in the land of the dead, the blind prophet had foretold that after reclaiming his home, Odysseus would one day have to set out again, on a strange final journey. He was to travel far inland, carrying an oar upon his shoulder, walking until he came to a people who lived so far from the sea that they had never seen one, a people who would mistake his oar for a farming tool. There he was to plant the oar in the ground and make an offering to the god of the sea, to atone at last and make his peace with the power that had hounded him so long. It is a haunting and mysterious prophecy, promising one more voyage beyond the poem's end. Even in his homecoming then, there lingers the sense of a wanderer who can never be entirely still, marked by the sea for one last journey. The story closes, but the road, it seems, would call him out once more. He was fated to travel again with an oar upon his shoulder. The image of Odysseus's final foretold journey is one of the most striking in all the tale. He, the great sailor, the man of the sea, was to walk far away from all water, into a land where the sea was unknown, carrying the very symbol of his seafaring life upon his shoulder, an oar. Only when a stranger, seeing him pass, mistook that oar for a winnowing fan, a simple tool for farming, Would he know he had reached the place he sought, a land utterly innocent of the ocean? There he was to plant his oar in the earth like a marker and make his peace with the sea god. There is deep symbolism in this strange errand. The mariner traveling until his oar, the emblem of his whole life, is no longer even recognized, carrying the sea itself into a land that has never known it. It speaks of an ending, a laying down of the wandering life, a final reconciliation with the great power he had struggled against for so long. Even beyond the poem, the story imagines one last quiet journey, and at its end, at last, a lasting peace. His death, the prophecy promised, would come gently from the sea. The blind prophet's foretelling of Odysseus's future ended with a promise of peace. After he had made his final journey and his offering to the sea god, the prophet said, Odysseus would live out the remainder of his days in comfort, and his own end, when it came at last, would be a gentle one. Death would come to him, the prophecy said, softly and from the sea, in a serene old age, with his people prosperous and content around him. After a life of storm and struggle and endless hardship upon the water, he was promised at last an easeful death and a peaceful old age, the calm reward of all his suffering. There is a deep comfort in that promise, that the much-tried wanderer, who had faced so many violent dangers, would in the end simply grow old in peace and slip gently away. It is the quiet resolution the whole story yearns toward, rest after labor, calm after storm. The man who had fought the sea so long would be granted, in the end, a peaceful passing. His troubles finally and forever behind him, his long odyssey come at last to a gentle close. The whole vast poem is built upon a single rhythm. For all its length and grandeur, the Odyssey is composed in one steady, unvarying rhythm, a particular meter that shapes every line. This regular pattern of long and short beats gives the poem its rolling, hypnotic sound, like the steady rise and fall of waves upon a shore. The ancient singers chanted the whole epic to this rhythm, and its constant, gentle cadence carried the listener along through thousands of lines. There is something deeply soothing in that steady beat, a measured pulse underlying the entire tale from beginning to end. It was the heartbeat of the poem, the frame on which all its words were hung, and it helped both the singer to remember and the listener to be carried away. Even in translation, something of that flowing, wave-like movement can be felt. The Odyssey was not only a story but a sound, a long and rhythmic chant that washed over its hearers like the sea it so often describes. That single enduring rhythm, repeated through every line across the whole enormous poem, is part of what makes it feel less like a mere tale and more like a spell, gently and endlessly unrolling. The singers never memorized it word for word. Here is a wonder of how the poem was made. The bards who performed the Odyssey did not learn it by heart, line by line, as we might memorize a passage today. Instead, they composed it anew each time they sang it, drawing on a deep store of traditional phrases, scenes, and story patterns to build the tale afresh in performance. They had learned not a fixed text, but a whole craft, a way of weaving the story on the spot from familiar pieces, so that no two tellings were ever exactly the same. This is why the poem is so full of repeated phrases and set descriptions, for these were the ready building blocks the singer used to shape his lines as he went. It is a remarkable art, this making of a great poem live in the moment of its telling, each performance a fresh creation upon an old and well-worn frame. The Odyssey, we know, is, in a sense, one such performance caught and fixed at last in writing, a single crystallization of a story that had flowed and shifted through countless living retellings, never quite the same twice, across many generations of singers. Repeated phrases helped the singer weave the tale. If you listen closely to the Odyssey, you notice certain phrases returning again and again. The dawn is described the same way each morning. The sea is given the same rich descriptions. Heroes are introduced with the same little tags attached to their names. These repeated phrases were not a lack of imagination, but a vital tool of the singer's craft. Ready-made and fitted to the poem's rhythm, they gave the performer building blocks he could reach for instantly as he composed aloud, helping him keep the meter and the flow without pausing to invent every word. To a listener, these familiar refrains became comforting landmarks, recurring like the returning dawn itself, lending the whole poem a warm and rhythmic familiarity. Far from growing tiresome, they wove a kind of soothing pattern through the tale, the same lovely descriptions coming round again and again like the turning of the days. They are one of the most distinctive features of this ancient style, and they remain to this day part of what gives the poem its dreamlike, incantatory quality. Its sense of a story told in a language of gentle, returning echoes. The sea in the poem is given a strange and famous color. Among the poem's most beloved recurring phrases is the way it describes the sea. Instead of calling it blue, as we might, the old poem again and again calls the sea by a color more like that of dark wine. This curious description has fascinated readers for centuries. Some have wondered whether the ancient poets saw or spoke of colors differently than we do, whether their language simply did not carve up the world of color in the same way ours does. Others think the phrase captures something real about the deep, dark, shifting hue of the wine-dark sea under certain lights, a richness that plain blue could never convey. Whatever the truth, the image has become one of the most famous in all of poetry. A sea the color of dark wine, mysterious and evocative. It lends the ocean of the Odyssey a strange and dreamlike beauty, unlike the ordinary sea of everyday sight, and it reminds us how differently the ancient world may have seen and named the things around it, leaving us, across the centuries, with a phrase whose exact meaning we can only wonder at, even as its beauty still stirs us. The poem was passed down for centuries before it was written. For a long stretch of its early life, the Odyssey existed with no written form at all. It lived entirely in the memory and the voices of the singers who performed it, handed down from one generation of bards to the next across the centuries. Only later, when writing had come into use, was the great oral poem at last set down in written words and fixed in the form we now have. This means that by the time it was written, the tale had already been alive and evolving for a very long time, shaped and reshaped through countless retellings. It is astonishing to think of a poem so vast, surviving for so long on human memory alone, carried purely by voice and tradition through ages that left no written record of it. The version we read today is like a single moment finally captured from a long living stream, the flowing oral tale frozen at last into text. Behind the written words we have lies an unwritten history far longer, a poem that lived and breathed in performance for generations before any hand thought to preserve it in the more lasting but far less living form of writing. Writing itself may have returned to Greece partly to capture such poems. There is a fascinating idea about how the Odyssey came to be written down. For a long period, the art of writing had been lost or unused in the Greek world, and its great tales lived only in spoken form. Then a new way of writing was adopted, and it was around this time that the great epics were at last committed to text. Some have wondered whether the very desire to preserve these treasured poems helped spur the spread of writing itself. So precious were the tales that people wished to fix them in a lasting form before they could be lost. Whether or not that is so, there is a beautiful thought in it, that one of the first and greatest uses of a reborn art of writing was to capture these beloved stories that had lived so long only in the air. The Odyssey stands at that very threshold, one of the earliest great works of a newly literate world, a bridge between the ancient age of the singing voice and the coming age of the written page. In its written form, we hold the meeting point of two worlds, the spoken and the written, joined in a single enduring poem. The poem helped shape the Greek idea of a hero. The Odyssey did more than tell a story. It helped to shape how an entire civilization understood what it meant to be a hero. Its hero is not defined by strength or battle glory alone, but by endurance, cleverness, and above all by his devotion to home and family. Odysseus is celebrated for surviving, for enduring, for using his wits and never giving up his longing to return. This offered a different model of greatness than the fierce warrior of the battlefield, one centered on resilience, on the long, patient struggle to overcome hardship and find one's way home. For the Greeks who cherished this poem, and for the many cultures who inherited it afterward, Odysseus became a lasting image of a particular kind of hero, the one who suffers much, thinks his way through, and endures to the end. His virtues are not only the loud ones of courage in battle, but the quieter, deeper ones of patience, cunning, and steadfast love of home. In shaping such a figure, the Odyssey helped to plant an ideal that has echoed through all the storytelling that came after. The hero measured not by conquest, but by the long endurance of the journey home. Hospitality to strangers was a sacred law in the poem. One of the deepest values running through the entire Odyssey is the sacred duty of hospitality, the obligation to welcome strangers and treat guests with kindness. Again and again the poem shows this law being honored or broken, and much of the story turns upon it. Good and noble people offer food, shelter, and gifts to the wandering stranger without even asking his name, while the wicked violate this duty, whether the monstrous giant who devours his guests or the arrogant suitors who abuse their host's home. To the ancient world, this custom was no mere politeness, but a solemn, almost holy obligation, watched over by the gods themselves. A stranger at the door might be anyone, even a god in disguise, and to turn him away or mistreat him was a grave offense. The whole poem can be read as a series of tests of this sacred law, showing who honors it and who betrays it. Through Odysseus's long wandering as a stranger in far lands, and through the invasion of his own home by faithless guests, the Odyssey holds up hospitality as one of the truest measures of a person's worth. Disguised gods were said to test that sacred law. The reason hospitality mattered so deeply in the world of the Odyssey was tied to a powerful belief. The gods, it was thought, sometimes walked the earth in disguise, appearing as humble travelers or strangers to test how mortals treated them. A ragged wanderer at your door might be a god in disguise, come to see whether you would show kindness or cruelty. To welcome the stranger generously was therefore not only right but wise, for you never knew whom you might truly be entertaining, and the gods rewarded the kind and punished the cruel. This belief gave the duty of hospitality a profound weight. Every guest had to be treated as though he might be divine, every stranger honored as a possible messenger of the gods. It cast a kind of sacred uncertainty over every encounter with the unknown traveler. In the Odyssey, this idea runs everywhere beneath the surface, lending each meeting with a stranger a hidden significance. And it carries a gentle lesson that still speaks to us, that we should treat everyone we meet, especially the lowly and the lost, with kindness, for we can never be entirely sure who they truly are. The poem is full of stories told within the story. One of the most delightful features of the Odyssey is how full it is of storytelling within its own telling. Characters within the poem are constantly recounting tales of the great war, of their own adventures, of the deeds of gods and heroes. Odysseus himself narrates a huge portion of his wanderings aloud to his hosts. Singers appear in the poem to perform tales for the characters, just as the poem itself was performed for its audience. This gives the whole work a rich, layered quality, a story that contains many other stories nested within it, tellers telling of other tellers. It is as if the poem is quietly reflecting on its own nature, celebrating the very act of storytelling that gives it life. In a world where tales were the great treasure house of memory and meaning, the Odyssey shows storytelling happening everywhere, weaving its characters' lives together through the sharing of remembered deeds. This layering is part of what makes the poem feel so deep and so alive. A great tale that is also, again and again, about the telling of tales, honoring the storyteller even as it unfolds its own long and wondrous story. A singer appears inside the poem itself. Woven into the Odyssey are figures who do exactly what the poem's own performers did: sing tales aloud to a gathered audience. At the court of the gentle seafaring people, a blind singer performs at the feast, taking up his instrument and telling of the famous deeds of the Great War. As it happens, he sings of events in which Odysseus himself took part, and the disguised hero, hearing his own past sung by a stranger, is moved to tears. It is a wonderful, mirror-like moment, a singer inside the poem performing the kind of heroic tale that the poem itself is, while the very hero of the story listens and weeps at the song. Through such figures, the Odyssey honors the singers who kept these tales alive, giving them an honored place within the story. The blind singer at the feast is almost a portrait of the poem's own makers, the bards who traveled and performed these epics. In showing us a singer singing, and a listener moved to tears by the power of the song. The poem quietly celebrates the whole art that carried it down to us, the ancient and enduring magic of the storyteller's voice. The poem may hide echoes of real places and voyages. For as long as people have loved the Odyssey, they have wondered how much of its geography might be real. The poem describes many islands and lands that Odysseus visits, and readers across the ages have tried to match them to actual places on the map, tracing where his voyage might really have led. Some think the wanderings reflect real sea routes and real coasts known to ancient sailors, dressed up in myth and marvel. Others believe the lands of the poem are wholly imaginary, a dreamlike geography that was never meant to be found on any chart. The truth is likely a mingling of both, real seafaring knowledge woven together with pure invention and wonder. This question has fascinated explorers, scholars, and dreamers for centuries, sending them poring over maps and coastlines in search of the hero's route. Whether or not any of it can truly be pinned down, the very search speaks to the poem's power, that so many have longed to believe its marvelous voyage might correspond to real shores. Somewhere between memory and imagination lies the map of Odysseus's wanderings, a geography that is part true sea and part enchanted dream. Scholars still argue over where the hero's home truly lay. Even the location of Odysseus's beloved island home, the very destination of his whole long journey, remains a subject of debate. The poem names his homeland and describes it, yet the description does not perfectly match the island that today bears its name, and this puzzle has long teased scholars and explorers. Some have proposed that his true home was a different island, or that the coastline has changed over the ages, or that the poem's geography was never meant to be exact. People have searched and dug and argued, trying to identify the real place the poem's hero yearned for so desperately. It is a curious and fitting mystery that the home at the heart of the greatest homecoming story should itself be a little uncertain, its exact location lost or blurred by the passage of thousands of years. The place Odysseus longed for across all his wanderings still, in a sense, eludes us, sought after but never quite pinned down. Perhaps there is something appropriate in that. The home of the great wanderer remains, even now, a thing longed for and searched for, its precise shore still drifting just beyond our certain reach. The poem survived across the ages on fragile copies. It is a small miracle that the Odyssey reached us at all. For most of its long history, before printing existed, the poem survived only through copies made by hand, written out laboriously on fragile materials that could rot, burn, or crumble away. Each copy had to be transcribed by a careful scribe from an older one, and it was through an unbroken chain of such copying, generation after generation, that the poem was carried down through thousands of years. Had that chain ever been fully broken, had people simply stopped copying it, the great poem might have been lost forever, as so many ancient works truly were. That we can read it today is thanks to countless unnamed hands that valued it enough to copy it out, over and over across the centuries, preserving it through the fall of empires and the passing of ages. Each surviving manuscript is a link in that long, fragile chain reaching back into the deep past. When you hear the Odyssey now, you are receiving something carried tenderly through time, by generations who refused to let it die, a treasure passed from hand to hand across the dark gulf of the years. It was the great schoolbook of the ancient world. For the ancient Greeks and those who came after them, the Odyssey and its companion poem were far more than mere entertainment. They were the very foundation of education and culture, the texts on which the young were taught to read, and from which people drew their sense of values, history, and the ways of gods and men. Students learned passages by heart, and the poems were quoted, studied, and revered as the shared inheritance of an entire civilization. To know these poems was to be educated. They served as a kind of common scripture of stories, a great shared well of wisdom and example from which a whole society drank. This gave the Odyssey an influence almost beyond measure, shaping the minds and imaginations of generation upon generation. It was not shut away as a rare treasure, but woven into the very fabric of learning and daily life. For centuries, To grow up in that world was to grow up with these tales, to have them read and recited and taken deeply to heart. The Odyssey was, in the truest sense, a foundation stone of Western storytelling, learned and loved at the very root of education itself. The word Odyssey now means any long and testing journey. So powerful and lasting has this poem been that its very name has entered our everyday language as a common word. We speak of an odyssey to mean any long, wandering journey full of trials and adventures, or even a great personal quest through the challenges of a life. A difficult voyage, a years-long struggle towards some distant goal, a winding path of hardship and discovery. All of these we might call an odyssey, borrowing the name of this ancient tale. It is a rare honor for a story that its title should become a word used by millions who may never have read a line of it. The name of one wandering hero's journey has come to stand, in our very speech, for the universal experience of the long, hard road, the testing passage through difficulty toward home, or towards some hoped-for end. In this way, the poem lives on, not only in libraries but in the language itself, quietly present whenever we reach for a word to describe life's greater journeys. 3,000 years on, we still call our hardest and most wandering passages by the name of this old tale of a man trying to find his way home. Countless later works have retold its ancient story. The influence of the Odyssey did not end in the ancient world. Its story, its themes, and its hero have echoed down through all the ages of storytelling since, inspiring countless later works in every form. Writers across the centuries have retold it, reimagined it, and drawn upon it, weaving its journey of wandering and homecoming into new tales set in new times and places. Its pattern, the long journey home through many trials, has become one of the deepest and most enduring shapes in all of storytelling, repeated and reinvented endlessly. Whenever a story tells of a hero enduring a long series of adventures on the way to some longed-for return, it carries a distant echo of this ancient poem. The Odyssey planted a seed that has flowered again and again in the imagination of the world. Its influence so vast that it can be felt in stories whose creators may hardly realize its source. Few works in all of human history have proven so fertile, so endlessly inspiring to those who came after. This one old tale of a wandering king has become a wellspring from which storytellers have drawn for thousands of years, and draw still. The first great work of Latin literature was a translation of this poem. Such was the fame of the Odyssey that when the Romans began to build their own literature, one of the very first works they produced was a translation of this Greek epic into their own tongue. A poet of the ancient Roman world rendered the Odyssey into Latin, and this translation is remembered as one of the founding works of Latin literature. So the poem stood at the beginning, not of one great literary tradition, but of two. First the Greek, and then, through translation, the Roman as well. It was as if each new culture, in reaching toward the making of great literature, turned first to this ancient tale as a model and a starting point. The Odyssey thus became a kind of seed from which whole literatures grew, carried from one civilization to the next, and helping to launch each on its way. There is something remarkable in a single poem playing such a role at the dawn of more than one great tradition, honored as a foundation by peoples and ages far removed from its origin. Even in its earliest afterlife, the Odyssey was already doing what it has done ever since, crossing borders and centuries to inspire the storytelling of the world. The hero's very flaws are what make him timeless. Part of why Odysseus endures as a character is that he is not a flawless, perfect hero. He is deeply human, marked by faults as well as virtues. He can be proud, as when his boastfulness brought the sea god's curse upon him. He can be reckless, curious to a fault, and sometimes deceptive. He makes mistakes that cost him and his men dearly. And yet these very flaws are part of what makes him feel so real and so relatable across the ages. He is not a distant, spotless ideal, but a believable person, brilliant and brave, yet also proud and fallible, capable of error and of growth. We recognize ourselves in him more easily because he is imperfect, because he stumbles and suffers the consequences of his own nature. His greatness lies not in being without fault, but in enduring, learning, and pressing on despite his failings. This is a large part of his lasting appeal. Odysseus is a hero we can believe in, precisely because he is flawed, a mingling of strengths and weaknesses much like our own, and in his all-too-human imperfection we find, across 3,000 years, a mirror of ourselves. In the end, the Odyssey is a story about coming home. Strip away all the monsters and marvels, the gods and the wonders, and at its very heart, the Odyssey is a simple and profoundly human story. It is about a man who wants only to go home, to return to the wife and child and land he loves, and about all the hardship he endures to get there. Beneath the grand adventure lies this deep and universal longing, the yearning for home, for the familiar, for the people who wait for us. It is a feeling every human heart has known in some measure, and it is what has given this ancient poem its unfading power. For all its strangeness and antiquity, the Odyssey speaks directly to something we all understand: the pull toward home, the ache of separation, the joy of return. That is why, across 3,000 years and countless changes in the world, it still moves us so. It touches the oldest longing in the human heart. In the end, this greatest of ancient tales is about the thing we all, in our own ways, are always seeking, the way back to where we belong, and the peace of finally, safely coming home. As we come to the end of our journey, let the sea grow calm and quiet around us at last. Tonight we sailed the whole long voyage of Odysseus, from the ashes of a distant war to the shore of his own beloved home. We drifted past the land of sweet forgetting and into the cave of the one-eyed giant, and we saw how a single moment of pride can echo through years of sorrow. We watched the winds spill from their bag within sight of home, and we walked with the hero into the shadowy land of the dead, where even the greatest warrior longed only to be alive again. We heard the Sirens sing of all the world's knowledge, and slipped between the monster and the whirlpool, and wept upon a paradise island for a home that lay far away. We saw a king return in beggar's rags, known only by an old dog and an ancient scar, and a faithful wife who guarded her heart until a secret rooted in a living tree proved her wanderer had truly come home. Let that long journey settle over you now, like a warm and gentle tide. If you enjoyed this slow journey, you can support the channel by liking, subscribing, or leaving a comment. It helps these bedtime journeys find the people who need them. And if you are still awake, there will be another video waiting for you on the screen, but there is no need to reach for it now. Let your jaw unclench, let your shoulders drop, let your hands grow heavy and still. Breathe in slowly, and let it go. Imagine the ship gliding home at last across a dark and peaceful sea, the weary traveler asleep upon the deck, carried gently toward the shore he loves. Let that same gentle current carry you now, down past all your cares, into calm and untroubled waters. You have come at last to your own quiet harbor. Sleep well, and good night.